I I'm highly aware that I have no obligation to share anything from my personal life on YouTube. Nobody does. I've definitely learned that lesson over the past few years or so. When I choose to do so, it's always coming from a place of, look, I've been through this. I'm struggling through this right now, and it might be able to help these thousands of people that are watching my work who reach out sometimes via email and tell me that I'm a motivation for them or I'm an inspiration for them. That's a big responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. But that's where I'm coming from. Hopefully, that perspective helps as we start this discussion. This one's about religion. It's about where I land on that spectrum. Sirens is part of living in downtown Atlanta. And if I had to put a term to it, I would say I'm anti religious. Nobody's born religious. You're introduced to it, and that's the kind way of putting it. Indoctrinated is another way that we could describe it. And you're not given much choice as to what religion you end up being. If you're born in one region of the world, you end up Christian. If you're born in one region of the world, you end up Muslim. Uh, if you're ethnically Jewish and you're raised in that environment, you end up Jewish. Catholic, etc., all the denominations of Christianity, it applies to them too. Same with Islam. And all of these are not, all these denominations you end up in, of the religions you end up in, are not decisions. They're not conscious decisions that most people make. It's just a byproduct of the life they lived and the community that they're surrounded by. At 14, I decided, or rather, came to the conclusion that this wasn't making sense to me. I was forced to go to church when I visited my grandparents every summer. They were in the choir and wonderful people. You know, my extended family lives out there in Kentucky and Louisville to be specific. And all of them were part of that environment. They were part of the church environment. That's just what you do in black families is go to church. And it wasn't even really an option to not go to church at that age. But through the Sunday school and then the joining the main congregation afterwards, as I got older, it just really became quickly apparent to me that I had questions that this religion couldn't answer, and that a lot of my questions were met with doubling down on faith and believing without seeing, and just things that I couldn't rationally accept for myself. And I decided back then that I wasn't going to church anymore. It actually led to a fist fight with my grandfather, which is a whole separate story. But I've accepted now at 36, 22 years later, that all the wrestling I've done with myself in the interim to pretend that I'm religious, to fit within this dichotomy in order to date successfully, in order to fit in my community and my environment that I find myself in, all of that has been delaying an inevitability, which is me looking in the mirror and deciding that no, you need to be publicly anti religious. The reason I'm ducking around the word atheism is that I don't think that term needs to exist. I would equate it to, and this is not even an argument I came up with originally, I would equate it to waking up and claiming that you're not an astrologer and then needing a word to describe that. We don't have one because it's the default position. Thinking you can read into the movement of the planet and the stars and assign things and meaning to the human existence is pseudoscience. And likewise, there are parts of religions that are pseudoscience. There are parts of religion that are fables, that are myths. Christians would very quickly identify Greek mythology as just that mythology, as myths. And the problem here is with all the miracles described in the Bible and all the words of these holy books, the Christian God doesn't have that many differences from Zeus. Zeus has impregnated women without another man being involved in the equation. Zeus has struck people down for blaspheming. There's just countless parallels. He's all powerful. He's bitter. He's jealous, vain, requires sacrifice. All these things that we see from the Christian God have direct parallels in the mythology of other religions. There's multiple gods in polytheistic religions, and all these main three that dominate the Western Hemisphere would look at those other religions and claim that all of them are going to hell. And then that brings us to the concept of heaven and hell. I don't think either one exists. I think they're both constructs of people. If you look at religions as being man made, everything kind of falls into place. Heaven is a construct that helps us feel better about the fact that being devoted and being devout while on earth doesn't result in riches and positivity and health and wealth and all these things, right? Some people suffer immensely despite being devout. So, to convince yourself that God is all good, you have to convince yourself that there's going to be a payoff after this existence. On the flip side, hell exists because those evil people that are persecuting those groups of people back in ancient times, thousands of years ago, nothing bad is happening to these bad people. So, it must work like a test, a big test that if you fail, you end up being separated from God. That's the technical definition of hell. And then burning for eternity is the cartoonish version of hell. These are constructs made by people that reflect our desires and what we want to see in the world. That was evident to me when I was younger, and it's only become solidified ever since then, that this all makes sense. It falls into place. If you look at them all as being made by human beings, they all make perfect sense. They reflect the times. That's the only thing that would explain why our Bibles not only support slavery all over it, but they also support the oppression of women and the dominance of men, the patriarchy, that hierarchy. That's thoroughly supported. And this is not up for debate. There is no translation of these scriptures that gets you away from the oppression of women and the support for slavery. It's just not possible. There's too many instances. And it's not only that it's happening in the time of the Bible when these people were alive, God is commanding it. God is permitting it. God is setting rules for it. There are rules about how to properly enslave people and how to conduct it ethically. There's no such thing as ethical slavery. And so if you insist that this God is all good and all powerful and omnipresent, then the argument that that's just the way it was back then doesn't hold water. God is eternal. Should be able to foresee that this slavery thing is highly unethical, right? And that's just a microcosm of the source of my lack of belief in this doctrine. I think it's the source of a lot of hurt and harm and pain. Historically, that's irrefutable as well, with the Crusades and the religious wars that continue through today, missionary work, which is just the extension of imperialism, of American imperialism in our case. It was used to brainwash my own people upon being brought here to the Americas. So there's just a mountain of evidence that these are man-made systems used to control people, as opposed to the inexorable truth of the world. And that's what religious people believe. They believe these books are the divine word of God. When the people who wrote these books weren't alive at the same time as Jesus, that's universally agreed on by even biblical scholars. And these books are fundamentally incompatible with science. They don't work. And there's whole denominations that claim wild things. I'm not even going to ascribe to the general religion, like the fact that dinosaurs didn't exist and the earth is however many years old, however many thousand years old, instead of the hundreds of millions that it actually is. We're at a place where our country is being run by these people. It's being run by religious people. We effectively live in a theocracy in America, which highlights the fact that religions are not inherently good. They do not inherently bring people together and make the world a better place. Some of the countries that index highest for general happiness and lack of armed conflict are the most atheistic. Australia, Denmark, Nordic countries, Europe in general, is less religious than what we have going on over here. And we're the biggest warmongers on the planet. We're the source for most of the armed conflict across the world because we have the most military bases across the world. I'm rattling all this off the top of my head. These are just things that I've thought about for decades and listened to scholars on both sides, religious scholars, non-religious scholars. And while I would technically classify as an agnostic atheist if you want to nail down my beliefs, because I don't believe in the existence of a God, and I'm also comfortable saying I don't know if there's a God or not. A Gnostic, on the other hand, would say that they know for sure that there is no God, and that agnostic Gnostic dichotomy also applies to theism. There's people who are religious and know for sure there's a God, and there's people who say they don't know, but they know that a God exists, but they don't know much about that God, or they can't be sure. That confuses me a little bit. How can you be a theist and also be uh, agnostic? But anyway, it's complex. Being a human is complex. These systems build up so much community and belonging and well-being while simultaneously oppressing groups in just a sweeping, massive, harmful way. And they somehow balance that by claiming that that's just how God is. These are just the rules. We're just following them. It may seem cruel that babies get cancer. It may seem cruel that people who are devout have the most terrible things done to them across the world, and that God could stop it but chooses not to. But that's just how God works. We're just puny humans, and we can't understand why he would do these things or why he is a he in the first place. There's a lot of confusing aspects, right, that I'm walking through with y'all as I kind of talk out loud, or think out loud. But it's just a conflict I've wrestled with for a long time. And I have to finally admit to myself that this is not something that reflects my view on the world. And there's a real cost for that. I'm going to lose subscribers, probably right now as we speak. I'm going to lose friends. I'm friends with a couple of devout couples, and I love them dearly. These people have become important to me, and I will suffer without them in my life. I will be even more isolated. But if they react to what I'm saying here and what I've said in other videos in a way that convinces them that I'm no longer a person that needs to be in their community, then I'm going to pay that price. And that's going to hurt. It's going to suck. On the flip side, I've been trying to date. And when I try to date people who are religious, it's always me trying to bend myself into a pretzel to accept their view on the world. There's been several instances in my life where I've had to take a stand and admit something to myself, admit that I believe or don't believe something, use my platform for good to affirm people who are underrepresented or oppressed. I've been outspoken as an ally of the queer community, which I see as a parallel to this situation, right? When you come out as homosexual, bisexual, asexual, anything that diverges from the norm, transgender, you're met with a lot of ostracization, right? Being removed from your families in some cases, being villainized, being criticized, being insulted. I would say the violence is heavier towards the queer community than it is towards people who are non-religious. But besides that, the parallels are strong. But it's something that is worth standing up for in my eyes as a cis hetero man. I think my duty is to carry some of their burden on my back. And that was the same decision I made when I made the video about fraternity hazing. It's wrong. It shouldn't have happened to me. I shouldn't have done it to other people. And young people coming up behind me, some of whom are pledging now and were in pre-K when I pledged, they should know what they're getting into. What's happening to them is inappropriate and potentially fatal. And I felt a responsibility with people dying that I needed to say something. If I didn't say something, then I'm part of the problem. That's how I've always seen it. And this is kind of the same. It's more than just me venting about my personal life and my struggles. I think I'll be okay. Like I'm monogamous, so I only need to find one person to date, even though trying to date black women as a non-religious person is like pulling teeth, especially in the Bible Belt where I live. But I'll be okay. You know what I'm saying? I'm relatively privileged compared to other people in these positions, especially people in the queer community who have to come out. I'll be fine. But there's people watching this who won't be unless they're given the strength or the reassurance that who they are is okay, that what they're choosing to do with their life is okay, and that their belief or lack of belief in these systems is also okay. You know, to make it plain, I think religious systems, religious institutions are problematic. I think they've caused more harm than good. And I think while they give individual people something to aspire to, something to live their lives by, and use as a guiding light, they also separate us inherently because of that doctrine that comes from those books. I could talk forever about this, you know, at length, but I think I've achieved the main purpose, which is to clarify where I stand. I think in previous iterations of my discussions around this topic, I've made it clear that I think intelligent design is a thing because black women exist. And I'm not completely refuting that. I still only date black women. They're the only people I'm interested in. So I do think they're that special. But I am revising my statement about intelligent design, which was half tongue in cheek, to be very completely honest about where I am. I fully accepted that I'm not religious. And while I'm not fully comfortable with the term atheism, because again, I don't think it should exist, I'm absolutely an atheist.